Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making these soft and chewy sourdough discard peanut butter cookies. So this is a really easy recipe for soft and chewy peanut butter cookies, and it's also a great way to use up your sourdough discard that you would otherwise be throwing away. I have started quite the collection of sourdough discard recipes. If you're new to sourdough, let me know. I'll make sure to share the link on how to make your own starter down in the description. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like having a pet, but you don't have to clean up after it. It's kind of not true. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's go ahead and get started. You'll want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to need a large mixing bowl. So the first thing we're going to do is you'll need 1 cup of unsalted butter, and you'll want to go ahead and melt it. So the butter's melted, but we want to make sure that it's cooled until it's no longer warm to the touch. So fill the bottom of the bowl. So long as it's not warm, you're good to proceed. If it is still warm, just wait. Otherwise, you're going to melt your sugar, your dough will be greasy, your cookies will spread. You'll leave me a comment asking why, and I already told you why. It's because your butter was too hot. So mine has cooled, so I am going to move on and add my other ingredients, starting with 1 cup or 200 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. Though if you wanted to use a blend of light and dark brown sugar, I support that. I bet that would be delicious. We'll also add 3/4 cup or 150 grams of granulated sugar. We're also going to add our peanut butter here. This is 1 cup of creamy peanut butter, which is 280 grams. And we'll add this in with our butter. These cookies have a really nice, strong peanut butter flavor, as you would expect. I love them. And we'll go ahead and stir everything together right here until it's well combined. Because this recipe starts with melted butter, it's very easy to mix everything together by hand. If you wanted to, you could certainly use an electric mixer or a stand mixer. That could even come in handy when you're adding in the dry ingredients, because the dough can get a little more stiff, but no stand mixer is necessary here. Now, I love using melted butter here because it helps make the cookie really nice and chewy. If you were to cream the butter, you're going to make the cookie a little bit more cakey and airy. Since we're using sourdough discard, the cookie is already going to try to be a little bit more like that, to be a little bit more cakey and a little bit more thick than we want it to be. So we're counteracting that by using melted butter. So let's go ahead and add that sourdough discard now. This is just a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. That's 110 grams. And I only really use sourdough discard that's like a day or two old. Sourdough discard that's been sitting too long can get really thin and watery, and if that happens, it can really kind of negatively affect your cookies. So I recommend using a discard that's not super old. You really shouldn't be using anything too old anyway. And before we mix this in, we can also add our eggs. So we're not using whole eggs in this recipe. Remember, sourdough discard is half water, so it wants to make the dough cakey and thick and dry. So we're going to counteract this by removing some of the water elsewhere in the recipe, and here we're doing this by way of removing the egg whites. So we're adding 2 egg yolks to the recipe and discarding the whites, or save them for meringues, or save them for making candied pecans, or save them, for making macarons. You have options. Or my sister will eat them for lunch. So to separate out the egg yolk, I just break the egg in half and then pass the yolk back and forth in the shell until all of the egg white has dropped out. And then the yolk goes in the bowl. Just separate that out. Sometimes that protein wants to hold on there. We're just going to knock it off. We don't want it in our cookie because we want soft, tender, chewy cookies. At least I do. And those are large egg yolks, and ideally they are room temperature. All right, next up, vanilla extract. We're going to add 2 teaspoons. This is my homemade vanilla extract, which is my favorite. This one's been sitting for like over a year now, so it has a really nice flavor. Let's stir everything together again. Okay, we can slide this out of the way and grab a separate medium-sized mixing bowl for our dry ingredients. This is 2.5 cups or 315 grams of all-purpose flour. We will also add a teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and some table salt. This is 3/4 teaspoon of table salt. Grab my whisk everything together, get that nicely combined, get our leavening agents nicely distributed in there. Gradually add it to our wet ingredients. So you do want to add this in like 3 parts. Don't add everything at once because it can become difficult to incorporate the ingredients well. The dough can get really dry really fast. We want to let the wet ingredients absorb the flour more gradually. Last bit. All right, one thing I love about this recipe is we can jump right into scooping, no chilling needed. Now, if your cookies do spread a little bit more than you'd like after the first batch, you can cover the dough and pop it in the fridge and chill it for like 15-30 minutes. It just probably means that your ingredients were a little bit warmer than they really should have been. All right, we're going to scoop the dough to 2 tablespoon-sized scoops. This is about 38 grams per cookie. And we're going to space the cookie dough at least 2 inches apart on the baking sheet. The sugar will come into play in just a minute. Now to make the cookies a little more uniform, I like to just roll the dough between my palms to form a nice smooth ball. Just make them a little more round and even looking. And then another thing I really like to do with these cookies is I'll take a little bit of coarse sugar, or if you don't have a coarse sugar, like a regular granulated sugar will be fine, and just sprinkle a little bit on top. I don't roll the whole cookie in the sugar, I just like a little sprinkling on top. And then we're going to do the traditional crisscross pattern. Now when doing this, don't press down your cookies too much or they'll be too flat. And if they bake too flat, they usually end up being a little too crisp and a little bit too crumbly. So we just lightly press them down with that pattern. Don't need to bake the sugar. And we'll take these over to our 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. They're going to bake in the center rack for 9 to 10 minutes. Now, if you've been making my cookie recipes for a while, you know that I like to pull them out when they're still slightly underdone, as these are, and I like to let them cool completely on the baking sheet. And if you move them early, they'll be fragile, so don't move them if you do this. And they'll finish baking on the baking sheet, and this keeps them soft and chewy for days, much longer than if you bake them all the way in the oven. And when I say underbaked, I mean slightly, just barely. Sorry if you can hear my cat Saucy, I'm filming cats. Once the cookies have cooled, you can enjoy them. And let me go ahead and break into one of these. They're so soft, they're so tender, they're so chewy. I think you're really going to love them. If you try them, let me know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. This is perfect. This is so good. Saucy. Can't have a cookie. Ooh, I'm gonna make a mess. Good. Okay, I don't know, you keep, you must have an expression or something. Saucy. I'm busy.